From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good morning. My name is Jonathan Yardley. I used to work for the Washington Post, which is a sponsor of this and has been since it was established 15 years ago. I'm retired now and very happy to be. The members of this panel are in alphabetical order: Lynn Freed, who is a distinguished novelist whom I've known not as well as I would like for about 20 or more years. She's a native of South Africa who lives now in California, and is a memoirist as well as a novelist. In the middle is Jeff Kloske, who is the publisher of Riverhead Books, which is one of the few really distinguished publishing houses in New York and maintains the tradition of serious literature. But the most important thing about Jeff Kloske is that he's married to my favorite cousin's daughter. And on the far end is Kevin Larimer, who is for about a decade has been editor of Poets and Writers magazine, which has been a powerful force for just as Jeff has been for maintaining the marketplace for serious literature. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Jeff.
Jonathan, thank you. It's an honor to be introduced by Jonathan, a great lover of books for many, many decades, and a Pulitzer Prize winner for his criticism, or I hate to use the word criticism, let's say appreciation of books over the many years. So we're here to talk about book publishing in the age of digital. Lynn, Kevin. You know, in books, of course, we have a great tradition of talking about things in sort of a paradise lost, fallen age. But here in this convention center with 100,000 people, all lovers of books, it's kind of hard to uphold that dour, downbeat tradition. You can kind of imagine some 16th century Venetian bookmakers, brighter, I don't know, you'd be a philologist or something or other.
Okay.
Sitting there and talking, you know, about movable type, you know, and they would complain and say, "Man, I miss the scriptorium and the illustrated manuscript." And the monks had it really good, didn't they? Yeah. So it's really a tradition to talk that way, but I really don't think that's the case in the age of digital book publishing. Though, I read something the other day I wanted to read here. This is from the Times Literary Supplement just last May. The novel is on its last legs. Drama is highly subsidized, and poetry only survives because of teaching. Literature as entertainment is giving way. Another consideration is that books are becoming quite difficult to sell. That's from the Times Literary Supplement in May, but actually that was they're quoting Philip Larkin from 1973. He was sure that things were going to just about to fall apart, and he was a librarian. Of course, in 1973, the trade paperback format had barely been established. The superstores didn't even exist. Books were still sold in department stores, and digital. I don't know. We would have looked at our fingers or something. So anyway, we're going to talk about how digital affects the creation of books, how it affects writers, how it affects the whole marketplace, and especially readers and how they come to know books. Lynn, I wanted to start with you and your memoir, which is a wonderful kind of depiction of your life in writing and in books, and it kind of gives a great scope of you know how your career has developed and changed, but also a little bit about you know how a writer's life evolves. In particular, I wanted you to describe briefly Homeground, just what it's about, your family's reception, and then the community reception, if you will, and then then I'm going to ask you some questions from there.
Okay, Home Ground was the third novel I wrote. The second one I had published. And what happened was that I went to, before I started writing it, I went to a writer's workshop, one of these summer workshops, the only one I'd ever attended. And I sat in the workshop with Gail Godwin, a wonderful novelist, who was talking about opening paragraphs and so on and so on. And I thought, I'm not going to be able to stand this. So at the break, I said to her, look, you know, this is really interesting, but do you mind if I don't come back? She said, no, not at all. And we became friends. We went out for dinner. And she said, my first novel was about to come out. It was a sort of predictably feminist novel published in the early 80s. And she said, what are you writing? And I told her. And she said, what on earth are you writing that for? So I was a bit taken aback. She said, well, with what you've told me about where you come from and so forth, why on earth aren't you writing about the world you know? Well, it takes apparently quite a while to come to what one should be writing, and certainly in my case, that was the case. So I wrote a novel, an autobiographical novel, as it turned out, not that it was fictionalized autobiography, but it was autobiographical fiction, about this rather eccentric theatrical family. Both of my parents were actors, in which I, as the youngest child, was the narrator. And the book, I had written it in first draft, and I got a letter back from an editor in America saying, this is all very well, but your narrator is so unlikable. And she's, and I thought, that's me. And she said, you need to change this, and you should read this, and you should read that. And a friend of mine said to me, look, this editor is going to ruin this novel. Send it to England. So in short order, it came out in England first. By the time it came out in America, it was a fait accompli. And yes, she was a tough narrator. And I told the story of my parents. Certain things I had to make up because life is a mess and fiction is orderly. So in the case of my parents, who had never actually owned a physical theater, I gave them a theater. And at some point, they ran out of money and had to sell the theater in the novel. When the novel came out, it was received very well in England and in the US. But in South Africa, there was absolute mayhem. The apartheid government was very obsessed with the fact that this young girl was experimenting sexually with the servants. So they banned me. They didn't ban the book, but they cancelled all my television and radio appearances. My parents were absolutely thrilled. They were theatre people. They understood publicity. And it was the best publicity, of course. Everybody thought it was a salacious novel, so it went into many printings. But I was sort of dismayed. Some years later, I was visiting my parents, and my mother, sitting and having a drink, turned to my father one day and said, such a pity we had to sell the theatre. Just to give you an example of how life follows fiction.
So just imagine, I mean, if you had written that today, I mean, Twitter would explode.
Yeah.
I mean, if everything had been
true.
the same, except that, you know, social media and other things had existed. Do you think you could have written that same book today and had the sort of, you know, proper presentation, at least in these other markets?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you one thing. If I were writing such a book at the moment, which in fact I am in a different mode, and I were worrying about Twitter and so forth, I would be paralyzed. I do think the only way to write, at least for me, honestly, is to forget that you're ever going to have the book read. Because as long as you're considering your reader, whether on Twitter or any other way, you're serving that reader and not whatever truth you're trying to find on the page, which is difficult to start off with.
Yeah, you say that in your memoir that you have to shut everyone out, including your editor and your imagined audience, so that you can proceed. And actually, in the session before this, Kevin Young, the poet, said the same thing, that he has to tune everyone out and sort of be alone with himself in order to compose.
I think that's hard to do. I mean, you can take years trying to shut people out. It's not simply a flip.
Yeah. So Kevin, I'm going to turn it to you. What do you think, is the proper posture for the novelist, a young version of Lynn today, starting out with earlier in the career? Are they able to exist? I mean, not on Twitter, not in the digital world. I mean, on the one hand, you have Elena Ferrante, right? And then Len, you'd be right next to her over here. And then you'd have, I think New York Magazine this week referred to him as Salman Rushdie as the over-tweeting bon vivant. I mean, Margaret Atwood, many other great writers too, are very interactive with their audience. Joyce Carol Oates is terrific, engage a lot, and are very present in the world and communicative with their audience. What do you think about that spectrum?
Well, I think that depending on the author, they're either active on that kind of thing or not. But I don't think that I mean, that's separate, I believe, from the act of creation and the actual writing of the book. I mean, I think Lynn is speaking for a lot of writers where I'm not sure you can keep your eye on both worlds as you're writing. It's a separate act. It's a creative act. It's it's a work of art that people are creating, and I'm not sure that you're going to get too distracted, I think, if you pay too much attention to Twitter and Facebook and all of those things. It doesn't mean that people don't also do that, but I think it's separate. And it's really a matter of just time, I think. I mean, that's certainly what the amount of time that I have to read is being condensed more and more. The kind of reading that I want to do, which is, books. And I mean, I obviously do a lot of reading for my job, but there are a lot of distractions. And so, yeah, I think it's a separate deal. But I think that when it does start to intersect is after the creative act of writing. I think that more and more authors are asked to take on the role of self-promoter and marketer more and more, depending on who they're published by. But I'd be interested in your take on that too. But I think that more and more authors are, once the book is published, they're expected to go out and engage their readers using these various social media platforms.
Yeah, I mean, an answer. I think it really depends on the author and what they're good and comfortable with. Margaret Atwood is hilarious.
Right.
She's a terrific engager on social media. So, for her, absolutely, I would say. Len, you write also in your memoir a lot about teaching and students. Do you teach as well, Kevin?
No.
Okay. And the sort of advice you give them, which is, and correct me if I'm mischaracterizing it, you really are a little bit cautious about the sort of MFA model, the group think, where things get workshopped and developed in that and that approach, because you think that's the audience that's in the writer's head, perhaps, and that might not be entirely a good thing.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
I think and I've said this many times in workshops that I've taught, that the problem with workshops, actually the best quote on the subject was from Donald Hall, a wonderful poet, who said, problem with workshops is that they trivialize art by minimizing the terror. And I think that indeed is the case. I know that if I were to be in a group and showed my work before it was ready to sturdy enough to receive criticism, I would be prone to rushing back with all the comments, which you're going to get regardless. You're going to ask someone for comments, you're going to get them. And change the thing to suit the audience. It's perfectly human to do that. And I think, in my case anyway, it's dangerous. In terms of workshops, I think the best thing I can do is to teach writers to listen, to train the ear, to read in a certain way, to examine a text that is marvelous, and to try to copy it. And then in the performance of that kind of apprenticeship, to find that writer's own voice if he or she is lucky enough.
I hope none of your next semester students are here.
I have one.
Are here, yeah. She likes to amp up the terror, she just said. Okay. Now,
could I just respond to
Sure.
the MFA thing? Yeah. I think that, I mean, I agree with a lot of what Lynn said, but I also think that to reduce one's experience at an MFA program to just the time around the table workshopping a piece of your writing maybe isn't quite fair. I mean, I think that, I went to an MFA program, and, it's 2 years to dedicate yourself to the study and writing of literature. And the great benefit for me at the program that I went to was not so much what I learned from the instructors, but it was more the people I met, the readers who came through to read, and basically my peers. It's a very intense experience. I was there for 2 years, and you really get to know some of the best readers of your work. And to just have that kind of time to devote is very special, I think. That's not to say that people should go into debt to go to an MFA program. I don't think they should, but I think there are a lot of valuable benefits to MFA programs beyond just what's happening around the workshop table.
Okay. Which leads me to my next question, which is, staying on this digital theme, predictions about the future and technology are famously often wrong, and I'm always, saddened that they are. I remember Keynes said in 1930 that we would be working 15 hours a week, which would leave a lot of time for y'all to read and buy books, and he was off by a fair bit. So a lot of things obviously have happened in the last, 10 or so years, wherever you want to mark it. With the rise of ebooks, with internet as a place of marketing and search and other things. We often, think of it as being utterly transformative, but it sounds like a lot of things haven't actually also changed. We all know that e-retailing or e-tailing physical books is quite a success. Everyone knows ebooks too, I think, have taken a goodly share of the marketplace. But there's so many other things that have come that haven't transformed sort of the kind of the promises that they set out to make. For example, sort of the sort of social reading technologies, or some other ones like the ones that are going to reduce your book into a thought tree, or build a soundtrack to accompany it, or give it contextual historical pieces that after a algorithmic analysis. What do you think about millions and millions of dollars that have been invested in all of these different things? But I would be surprised if anybody here said that they had read many books that had been sliced into thought trees through an app. We can ask later. I mean, what do you think about the promise of transformation and what it's delivered?
Well, the promise of transformation. I mean, I'm not sure this is necessarily going to answer your question, but it was interesting to me. I recently read a study that was saying that actually the ebook sales have declined in I think the first quarter of 2015. They actually have declined like 8%. I think that was the Association of American Publishers came out with that. And print trade paperback books actually increased by like 8%, or more than that, a little less than that, 7.5%. So I think maybe the kind of the demise of print has been exaggerated maybe a little bit, and that I think obviously a lot of. I mean, I would be interested to know how many people here read. Could we do a show of hands, maybe?
Sure.
Like,
Sure.
How many people read read ebooks on some sort of device? Okay.
How many read primarily on a device?
Okay, so
What do you think that's about 15 to 20%?
maybe,
Yeah.
maybe not even.
Okay.
I would say.
They're here at the National.
They're
Book
here at the
Festival.
National Book Festival, and that's the thing, right?
The National eBook Festival
It's somewhere else.
Is on the, it's
It's
on
on
the
the
West
street.
Coast.
It's down
Yeah,
the street.
yeah, okay.
Well, that's true, right? I mean, the theme for this is I can't live without books, right? And Thomas Jefferson said that. And it's not that I can't live without ebooks, or it's not that I can't live without print books. It's just I can't live without books. And I think I kind of choose to focus on that a little bit. And going back to the sort of history of all of this, I was at the Library of Congress yesterday morning, and I went into this exhibit. I don't know if you guys have seen it yet, but the Bay Psalm book, which was the first book ever printed in North America, or United States at least. It was like 1640 this thing was published, and it's beautiful. And you know what? It looks exactly like the books that we're printing today. I mean, it's obviously old, and it's got the yellowed pages, which I love, but it's the same thing that we buy in the bookstore, without the jacket. I think that, some people like to read ebooks, some people like to read print books. I think, this might be going off a little bit, and tell me to stop if you want me to, but what I've really seen in my job over the last 10 years or so, there are a few things that promise sort of a transformational reading experience. And those things, as far as I can see, sometimes they're interesting, but it hasn't exploded into this large trend, I don't think. Obviously, ebooks are a trend, and maybe that's starting to decrease a little bit. But what I've really seen is sort of the access to, as the ability to design and produce and then promote and market a book has become more accessible to more people, who have the access to digital tools to not only make a book, but promote and market that book to a national or international or global audience on social media. What I've seen is a big increase in independent presses. On the website for Poets and Writers, it's pw.org, we have a database of small presses, and there's 415 independent publishers in that database, and those are only the ones who sort of qualify for inclusion in that database. So they have to have a publishing history and proven distribution method and things like that. So that's really what I'm seeing is like this huge growth in really exciting, independent publishers who are, they have a very low bottom line, and they're really serving like this very specific aesthetic or genre or group of readers. And since that bottom line is so low, just the way this sort of small batch publishing, I don't know, I've really seen sort of a rise in the sophistication and size of that group of publishers. And so therefore, I feel like, rather than there being fewer options for writers to publish books, there's more and more. It's not just, get an agent and an editor at a commercial publishing house. There's all of these other options available to writers. And so that's just kind of an exciting thing that I've witnessed over the years.
There really are no good excuses anymore. There are no gatekeepers. There's no gate.
Well, there's gatekeepers, but there are just more of them, I think.
Yeah. Well, more of them. More gates, smaller gatekeepers, if you will.
Right. Sure.
But that people, the costs are approaching nothing for someone to create something and turn around and market it. So yes, that should see a bloom of material.
Well, and that's not even counting the self-publishers.
Yeah.
And that's a huge, that's just exploded. There was something like, since 2008, well, in 2013, I believe there was like 500,000 self-published titles published, 500,000. And that's like 450% of what there was in 2008, I think it was. So, the problem, there is no gatekeeper there, that you're right. Anyone can do it with a relatively modest, expenditure of money. You can self-publish a book. Anybody can. And there's no gatekeeper, but how people are actually finding those books, it's just a sea of books and good luck. But again, social media being what it is, anybody can, let people know about them. Whether they want to buy them is another question.
All right. Lynn, I'm going to throw you a curveball here.
Go ahead.
Fan fiction. No, you said you find someone you like and you try to inhabit them in the MFA program. I mean, fan fiction has produced some of the biggest. We're going to qualify. We'll just say biggest publishing successes of the last decade. I think people like E.L. James and Stephanie Meyer and so forth.
Well, hooray for you. I mean, you're the publisher. Or
I'm not the publisher.
You're a publisher.
Unfortunately.
So it's terrific for you, yeah.
But do you think that's, for somebody starting out, is that a good way to get going?
I don't think there are any secrets. I think if you're mad for fan fiction, I suppose that's what you write. Or try it out. Maybe it won't work for you. I know that a lot of young people who want to write love to read fan fiction. Therefore, I presume that's how they want to start writing. So no, I mean, it totally does not appeal to me. I couldn't even read Wind in the Willows. So I'm not the person for that. But I did want to add on quite another subject to mention audiobooks. I don't know if it falls under the rubric of ebooks, but I listen to a lot of books. Which I download in electronic modes. I suppose it does fit. And I absolutely love that. But as a girl, I had been read to a lot. And I think if you have a marvelous reader, some of the readers are awful, but if you listen to it, and it's lovely. I'm listening to books that I have not read for years. And because of where I live, I'm about an hour from where I want to go. I listen in the car. I listen walking around. I walk a lot. I listen. It's a wonderful way to read. So yeah, that's just it.
I mean, given that Keynes was so off about the work week, that's a way you can cram some books into your...
Exactly.
It's also great for children who are car sick and you go on a long road trip, which I recently did. And my daughter was able to listen to Jane Eyre the whole way, and she never got sick, so it's great.
Okay, we've sold some audiobooks here. That's very good. All right.
Audible.com now.
Okay, we want to open up to questions in the audience. Many obvious digital readers out there. But either way, any question you have, let's take a few. You with the long arm. Just say it and I'll repeat it.
My question is just, okay, the digital age is very good in some ways for writing books. It also seems there's, as you've discussed, there's more writers than ever. There's costs less than ever to actually produce books. So the price of books is reflecting that, and so the economics seems to be changing. What do you think is happening as far as how are professional writers affected by this, and how are they affected by all the competition from what appear to be more amateur writers than ever?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, it's like a number of other things where you know more can often be less. If the problem you have is getting noticed, getting attention, getting focus in a busy world, just simply having many more times the competition that you would have had a decade ago, that's a big hurdle for you. That's a big problem. So as things get faster, cheaper to make and bring to market, it gets harder and harder to distinguish yourself in that market, build an audience, and produce some successful results. So it's one of those things that is always elusive. In terms of the economics for writers, you know, it's of real concern to them. Many of them work incredibly hard and don't have any knowledge of like how it's going to result and what kind of financial outcome will occur. So they are paying close attention. I tend to think that people will pay a reasonable price for really high quality content. And so if it's a book that you want, if it's the new Elena Ferrante, and it's a reasonable price, you will certainly go for it. That's my opinion. Yes, miss.
Hi, I remember a couple of years ago they were talking about that a lot of authors were feeling pressured to write more and to write faster because of the ebooks and so forth. Do you still feel it's that way, that people have to produce more instead of that people are no longer kind of tolerant of waiting 2-3 years for a book?
That's a really good question, and I like. It depends on the kind of book you write, and I think your interaction with your audience. If your audience expects to hear from you on a regular schedule, James Patterson, 4 or 5 times a year, then you need to maintain a pace. It's something they're looking forward to. So there might be some pressure there. What do you think about the media cycle being what it is?
I mean, I would guess I would just ask you whether you think that's. Do you think James Patterson is feeling that pressure, or do you think the publisher is feeling that pressure? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, is he, or an author like that, like, oh, I have to get a book out really quickly, or will people? Readers will wait a little while for another book. I'm just wondering if that's more the publishing industry that's applying that pressure rather than the author. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't pretend to speak for James Patterson,
No.
but I have no idea.
Yeah.
But no, publishers, if they meet with a successful outcome, they will almost certainly seek to repeat it. If it's the sort of thing that can be repeated, often phenoms or sort of one off books are not the kind that you can. But like with any, I think, success you have in life, yes, you rinse and repeat. I think go over here. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. What do you think is going to be the impact of the deluge of self-publishing on the traditional publishing houses, and what do you think the strategy must be for publishing houses to compete in the new, the influx of self-publishing, and indeed in the digital world, for them to be successful?
That's a little bit dovetailing with the earlier question of many, many more times the competition in the marketplace from self-publishing. You have to be better. You have to sort of, the book has to be better. The marketing, the publicity, the presentation, the advertising, everything. You really, competition, I think most of us would agree, tends to, make you try harder to distinguish yourself. So I work for a traditional publisher. We are really excited about the self-publishing revolution because we really think many, many great things are going to come out of it. New forms, new ideas, new writers that might come to traditional publishing. Maybe they never will, but it will create a really healthy ecosystem. And we still have to be really good at what we do every day to succeed in the midst of that. But don't really worry about getting drowned out.
Could I would just add, I guess maybe that question kind of presupposes that a self-published author has the goal of selling as well as one of these, best-selling authors. And I'm not sure that, I quoted that 500,000 self-published titles. I'm not sure that all of those people are going at it thinking they're going to be famous necessarily. I think it's just a matter of scope. For some people, they have a book that they think is worthy of being published, and maybe they've taken the traditional route and that hasn't worked out, or maybe they just want to self-publish a book, and maybe 1,000 copies is perfectly reasonable, and that's what they want to do, and they want to have it, and they want to sell it on their own. And I think that even selling 1,000 copies is a big task. But I think that, again, not to keep going back to social media, but all of these tools, these digital tools that we all have access to, I think it is possible to sort of go on this, campaign to sell your own book. But again, whether or not, I'm not sure that it's definitely not realistic, and I'm not sure that it's reality that a lot of self-published authors are coming at it like, I'm going to be James Patterson or E.L. James necessarily. Lightning strikes, but it doesn't.
That's a good point.
Not very often.
So the goal might not be commercial success. It might just be being on the main stage here at the National Book Festival. That could be the goal. Okay, I'll go back over here.
I'm a retired librarian, and I just wanted to ask a question about relationships of book reading versus other kinds of media reading and so forth. I don't think there's a big difference between printed and electronic books for most people. I read electronic books now because I live in a small apartment and I can carry my library of 300 books with me in my back pocket. And otherwise I'd be happy to read the print ones. It also has some search capabilities, which the other ones don't. It's different. But what I've noticed is that I find out about more books and I can buy them quicker in the electronic digital age than I did before. So I'm expanding more. I'm never going to be able to finish them all. But I've also seen younger people very much, I think, are busy with their iPhone all the time, and they want to hear a video or they want to go to a movie, and they don't have time with the work to read books. And I'm wondering if you've noticed there are any statistics about the fact that there's less people, or it's harder to have people who want to concentrate on it, actually read a whole book, rather than just go to the movie or see a review of it or get a video of it or something like that.
Right. First, I want to thank you and commend you for buying more books than you plan to ever read. This man is not just a librarian, he's a hero. There are statistics of just they do a lot of like household surveys of how people spend their time and how they consume entertainment and what portion of that is books. It's remained relatively stable over the last certainly 10 years. I think sometimes actually things like a Harry Potter can alter those statistics because so many people who are sort of extremely casual, maybe even reluctant readers, come in to participate in a phenom like that. But I think for the most part it's holding steady. I mean, we could go back, I could read the Philip Larkin quote from 1973. Again, he was worried about the same thing, which is that books were under threat. And it's our impulse, it's our way of talking. As a librarian, you probably feel many threats to the library and to books, but then we look here at 100,000 people in the convention center and also feel a great deal of hope and support, I think. Okay, 2 minutes. Okay.
Quick question. I raised my hand about being an e-reader, and I was wondering how, though, the introduction of e-books has affected you in the publishing industry. Are your timelines to get a book out longer? The e-books, they advertise them as usually cheaper, so are you competing with yourself? And
That's a great question. Our goal is really to reach readers and whatever format they want. To publish is to make public. So we want it to be as widely available in print and digital and audio and whatever's next. That's really our goal. We're kind of agnostic about format. We want to support writers, support their work, and yeah, the price can go up and down. Ebooks have kind of been up and down, trying to figure out what the right native price for it is. Books used to not be discounted the way they are now. In other countries, completely different retailing models. So yeah, that's the answer. It's not a threat. It's an opportunity to reach this librarian over here who's going to buy more than he could consume, and he's going to carry it. So I think we see it more as an opportunity. Anything to add?
Well, I just wanted to add really quickly that I know this is the National Book Festival, but I mean, with the rise in all of these digital tools and the digital age here, I think that some genres and forms of writing are able to be distributed much more effectively now, actually, than when they were confined to sort of print distribution channels. And I would just say poetry. I don't know if there's any poets out there, but take a thing like, it's not a book, but take a thing like Poem a Day, which is one of the sister organizations of the Poets and Writers is the Academy of American Poets. And they have Poem a Day, which is a free email, and you get a poem a day. And they have like over 100,000 subscribers to it. And that's still publishing too. I mean, that's to make public. And that they're making poetry public in this way that they couldn't have done, however many years ago. But so anyway, that's just something to enlarge the perspective a little bit.
All right. I'm told we are over time, so I want to thank you guys. I want to thank you, Lynn and Kevin.
Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.